Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to LinkedIn Live Lunch. Oh, man. Ah, I did it wrong right out of the gate. Welcome to LinkedIn Lunch live stream here on the Dev Mentor Dave YouTube channel. Typically every Tuesday and Thursday at 1 p.m. unless life throws us a third of curveball, which it often does. So the plan of 1 p.m. doesn't work every time, but most of the time I think we're typically available. So if you are watching live, jump in the chat, say hello, participate. That is part of the goal of this live stream, is to get your participation. Obviously, we're going to be looking at posts on LinkedIn, and I'm going to be giving my opinions on those posts, and sometimes I'll agree, sometimes I'll disagree. Doesn't mean I'm right and they're wrong, or they're right and I'm wrong. Just means that I'm coming from my perspective and you have your perspective, from the things that you've experienced and the things that you have knowledge of, the things that I have knowledge of and I've experienced. We're all going to come at this thing a little bit from a little different angles. So certainly feel free to share your opinions and share your experiences in the chat, and I'd be happy to interact with you guys and tell you why you're wrong. No, I'm just kidding. So jump in the chat, say hello. Hey, Ian, good to see you. And Dimitri, good to see you as well. As a reminder, I mentioned this on Saturday, but if you weren't on the Saturday live stream, or if you haven't watched it, this will be the last LinkedIn Lunch live stream for 2024. I am planning on bringing it back in 2025. I think it's been a good content builder, and I'm going to try to keep using it to build content as well in the near future, still trying to iron that process out as far as the best way to do that without spending too much time on it. So but this is the last one, so we're going to look at just a few, and I might end up pulling this one a little bit shorter too, just because I've got some things being near the end of the year that I need to clean up and take care of for work as well. So might have to cut this one a little bit shorter than normal, but hopefully it'll be informative and helpful for you on your development journey. And as always, again, feel free to share your opinions and ideas and concerns and questions along the way. If you have a question, certainly feel free to pop that in the chat. Just write at DevMentorDave, and that'll give me a little red box that'll let me know that somebody's trying to get a hold of me specifically, and that way I'll be able to see those and respond to those. If you have a question that's about something that we're going over in the LinkedIn post, or anything else really, this time is for you. It's not just for me to sit up here and blab the whole time. So certainly feel free to ask questions and share your opinions, because really I'd rather interact with you guys than LinkedIn anyway. So there you go. All right, let's see. Man, I need a haircut. Ugh. All right. I know you all are very concerned about my looks. So, let's jump in here. We're going to go with this one first. All right, this is a topic that I've sort of talked about. I don't think I've addressed it necessarily in this specific wording, but I've definitely talked about some of the concepts before, and I thought it would be good just to kind of review and share, kind of build off of this here for a second. So let's read through the post first. It says, developers should make as many mistakes as possible. Sort of. I mean, that's just more of an attention grabber, to be honest with you, so we'll let it slide. Developers should make as many mistakes as possible. More mistakes means more growth. Why? If you're able to learn from your mistakes, then making mistakes is never a negative. It's just another opportunity to learn. Break the build, duplicate pieces of code, merge into the wrong branch, make as many mistakes as possible. Yes, it feels bad in the moment, but it creates a learning opportunity. That's true growth. So here's the biggest caveat of this entire post, right? The biggest caveat of this entire post is this part right here. If you're able to learn from your mistakes. All right, this is the key. This is the key to making sure that this post is accurate and helpful. If you're able to learn from your mistakes, I would largely agree. Oh, sorry, my button's not working. I would largely agree with most of what he says here in this post. this is one of the reasons why I'm not a huge fan of spending a bunch of time on tutorials. You need to be out there building real things, or at least real to you things, and you need to be doing it in a way that makes you grow. And quite frankly, you're going to grow more through struggle and failure than you're going to grow through success. Think of it kind of like your muscles, right? If you've done any exercising, which I've done very little of in my life, but I've read a lot about it. But basically, what's happening is when you exercise, especially something like weightlifting or something like that, right? What you're doing is you're actually breaking down the muscle um, through that effort of exercise, and then you're giving it rest, and that rest then allows it time to build itself up bigger and better and stronger than it was before. And that's kind of the same concept here when it comes to, making mistakes in coding. But the caveat with all of that is you've got to be able to learn from the mistake. If you just make mistakes and then you keep making the same mistakes, or if you just make mistakes and then you just kind of shove that project to the side and never deal with the mistakes, you have a broken project and you never go back and fix it, well, that's not going to be helpful, right? So if you're going to go down this road of doing things that are going to give you opportunities to make mistakes, you need to have the stick-to-itiveness, if that's a word, the stick-to-itiveness, the tenacity. You have to have the willingness to go through the process of actually learning from that. And for the most part, most of the devs that I've worked with, and even junior devs that I've mentored and talked to, most of you are willing to do that. But that is really the key. I think most people know that it's the hard times that you go through that turn you into who you are, right? Everything that you have struggled through has made you who you are. If you don't struggle very much, you won't appreciate what you have learned. You won't appreciate what you achieve. This is one of the reasons why, people talk about the fact that people who inherit money typically are very poor users of money, and that's because they don't value it. They don't value what they've been given. They value not having to worry about it, right? But people who work hard for it, they value it much more. They care for it much more. And it's the same way about your job and your knowledge and your skill set as a developer. If you've struggled through something, it will be more valuable to you later on in your journey, because you will not only have learned about an issue, but you will have learned how to overcome that issue and potentially how to avoid that issue in the future. So making mistakes is always the best way to learn. We do talk about how you don't want somebody to have to make the same mistakes you made, or we want to try to protect people from making mistakes. I think about my kids, right? I would prefer that my kids listen to my advice and take that to heart and follow it and help themselves not go through some of the struggles and the frustrations that I've had to go through, whether it's personally or in my career or relationships, whatever that is. I hope that they will take my advice and just do it. Unfortunately, we are people are creatures of learning by hardship, and that is the same with life as it is with development. So you're going to learn more, and it's going to benefit you more when you go through the struggle yourself, rather than just knowing all the shortcuts, knowing all the ways around it. Fighting through the struggle yourself is going to be helpful. Now, the other caveat that I would give with this, besides the fact that you need to be willing to actually learn from your mistakes and able to learn from your mistakes for this to be okay, is I would still caution you to do your best to not make the mistakes when you're working in somebody else's code base. Whether that's a friend's code base or whether that's an employer's code base, you should be more careful there. But you should also make sure that they have good processes and procedures in place so that when you do make mistakes, it isn't a big deal. If we go back here, he mentions, break the build, duplicate pieces of code, merge into the wrong branch. Like, those are all things that you can overcome on your own, in your own thing, your own branch, your own code base. But and they're not necessarily the best thing to do on the job. So I would just make sure that if you're working with with someone that they have the knowledge and the skill set and maybe even the tools to be able to fix any of those types of mistakes as you make them. But overall, I would generally agree with most of what was stated here, with a huge emphasis on making sure that you're actually learning from it. It's one thing to make lots of mistakes; it's another thing to learn from lots of mistakes. So there's that. All right, let's see. Got some talking in. Oh, hey Mel, good to see you. Welcome to the last LinkedIn lunch live stream of 2024. Let's see. Different mistakes that you overcome is good, not so much many mistakes. Yeah, you want it to be diverse, that's for sure. That is one thing. If you're making the same mistake over and over and over again, you're not really learning from it. You're just overcoming it again over and over and over again. So, yeah, hopefully at some point you should be not making the same mistake as you made previously. Dimitri says, I would add, don't be a victim. Don't try to explain yourself. Don't try to explain yourself that anything but you is a course. Sorry, I didn't catch what that's saying. Mistake, learn, go. Life is good to teach the same lesson again and again until we learn. Yeah, that's true. But you have to actually learn it, right? You have to actually learn it so that you can succeed. That's true, Mel. It's hard watching your kids make mistakes. Luckily, you're there to pick them up after. Um, yeah, I do agree. That is probably why mentors help so much when people are learning. They help you get back on your feet and realize it's not as bad as it seems, right? That's another place where a mentor can really come in handy. Is to not just come alongside and say it's no big deal, but come alongside and say it's okay. Because one just says don't worry about it. The other one says let me show you why we can fix that or how we can fix that. Let me show you why it's not a big deal because we can do this or we can go down this path. Excuse me, go down this path. So, yeah, I think there's definitely lots of opportunities from a mentoring standpoint to come into this situation and not just show you how to fix something or not just show you how to figure out how to fix something, but also show you that 99.9% of things are fixable. I even had not that long ago, let's just say, we'll say at my current job, I was doing some work and I forget if I just pushed something. No, I deleted. I accidentally deleted our staging branch. And the way that we had done some of our branching processes, it wasn't necessarily just make a new branch from main or make a new branch from develop. So I had to go back through all the commit history and find everything and piece it back together, which was really annoying. But it was a good thing because it reminded me of some of the things that I needed to do to make sure that I didn't do that again. Whether that was doing some things through our Git repository, or that was just something in my own procedures to change, and it was very bad. I was literally walking around my room with a lot of consternation here, and I've been doing this for 20 plus years, to some degree. So I mean, things that I should know better, and I just didn't. I just clicked the wrong button, made the wrong choice, and didn't realize what I was doing, and spent a lot of time fixing it. But it got fixed. At the end of the day, it was a fixable thing, and that's especially if you're following good practices with like Git repositories or things like that. Most of the stuff that we mess up can be fixed. Are there times where you can't fix them? Sure. If you don't have database backups and you delete a database like that, that's a big problem. But hopefully you're smart enough to set up database backups through your hosting provider, or some other method, right? and just make sure, or maybe before you do a push, you always do a backup of the production database, or maybe it's a process thing. So there are some things you can't recover from, but most things outside of data loss, most things are things that you can recreate. Maybe deleting the entire repository might be something you can't recover from, unless somebody else has a copy of it on their machine and they can push it back up. So there are some things you can't recover from, but I would say the vast majority of mistakes, especially mistakes that junior developers make, um, are recoverable mistakes, and that's where a good mentor or a good, whether they're an outside mentor or just a coworker, can come alongside and say, "Hey, I've been there. It's not that big of a deal. Sure, it might take some time. It might take some frustration and be difficult. I'm not saying it's easy, but you're going to make mistakes, but most of them are fixable. And I think it's important to remember that as you're going through this process of making lots of mistakes and growing through those mistakes. Always understand, most of the time it's probably fixable. If it's not, well, there are other jobs out there. Oh my. Oh man, you guys are just going after it here. Let's see. Uh gotcha. Mel says I freaked out so much when I forced merge to main on deep pockets. I'm much better with Git now though. See? Learning process. And you know what? It worked out just fine. I don't think I said anything mean about it, so uh has anyone heard of Bite Size from Experts Exchange? Uh, Not that I can think of. Dimitri says, "Oh, I deleted a branch also. After I created a new one with that name, I found a PC with fetch branch and push it. Add a couple of latest commits." Yep. I mean, there's always something. If you're using good tools like Git and things like that, there are generally ways around it. You could also potentially just go back in your commit history and create a new branch off of a specific commit. That's another way to do it. Sometimes, depending on your commit history. Oh man, good times. I'm sure we all could spend probably the entire afternoon sharing the horrible things that we've done. Ooh, thirsty today. All right. Let's see what's number next. Do do do. All right, let's take a look at this one. This one's more of a coding thing. Yeah, good idea, Dimitri. I have an attitude that everything is possible. I just don't know the way to do it yet. Absolutely, especially if it's something that's been done before. Obviously, it's possible, right? So, absolutely, you definitely want that attitude um, when it comes to your mistakes. Okay, let's take a look at this one from Nick Haraldson. Excuse me. I've been tasked with upgrading my team's Next.js project and its dependencies. It is, I think it means it. It is definitely not a straightforward task. Going down the rabbit hole of dependency injection upgrades can be such a mess. For example, upgrading Next.js required an upgrade to a more strict TypeScript. This revealed occasional implemented code that I've had to fix. And Next.js upgrade has also introduced hydration mismatch errors, which are pricing to be painful to find and fix. Oh, he just means it's going to be. He knows it's going to be hard to find and fix. One dependency upgrade always leads to another, which leads to breaking changes. It's definitely a challenge, but our code will be much better for it in the end. Yep. Uh, this happens with most code bases, but um, I've noticed a lot with JavaScript. I don't know what it is. JavaScript seems to use even more packages than any other language I think I've ever programmed in. When you especially get into those frameworks and things like that, um, please stay on top of your packages. Update those frequently. It'll be really painful to upgrade later on, just like Nick is talking about here. I've got, I can't tell you how many projects I've had where the dependencies and the packages were outdated, and it took hours and days to get it just to a stable point with all the upgrades, because again, packages get updated and they create new requirements sometimes, and your old code is going to break in certain places. You may not be able to find all the places where things break either. So this is another good reason why you should implement testing in your applications. I saw something. I almost picked it for the LinkedIn lunch live stream today, but it was talking about how uh, this person had good coverage on a test on a project with tests, but they have another project that's more complex that runs better than the one that has tests and it doesn't have any tests. And so it wasn't saying don't write tests, just like be reasonable with it, right? But this is a good use case for tests. If your code breaks in a place that you don't often interact with in normal usage and testing, then you're not going to find it just in basic user testing, most likely. But if you have tests written for it and you're working on these dependency updates, you're going to have failing tests when the code breaks or when it doesn't meet the requirements. And so it's important to make sure that you're doing that on a regular basis, especially with JavaScript. It gets out of date really, really fast. But whatever frameworks you're using, stay up to date. Now, I don't think you have to be on the latest of everything. Generally, it's probably not a good idea to be on the latest of everything, because just because something is new doesn't mean it's debugged well. So I wouldn't necessarily advocate for being on the latest of every package, but you want to be pretty close, especially if there's security issues that they fixed. And you want to make sure and be able to test that stuff as frequently as possible to make sure that your code is not breaking someplace because of those dependencies, those packages. Because they are going to break things and you're going to need to fix them. Also, along with this, don't ignore the warnings. So when you're compiling code in your npm run build and you're getting all those warnings about things in your code that, it will still run, but, really you should do it a different way. Make a plan to fix those and fix them. Like, actually make sure that it's all running smoothly. You can do a build without even the warnings. Now, there are times where warnings are just warnings and you don't want to do it the way that they want you to do it. That's fine. But maybe look into suppressing those warnings in those specific instances. But if you're getting warnings, that should be a warning to you, right? That should tell you, hey, I need to maybe change some things so that it's following the standards better, or so that I'm recognizing that something that is deprecated is taken care of. I'm upgrading to the right version, or whatever the warning is. Don't just accept that it's warnings and it's no big deal because it's warnings and you just move on, right? So definitely update your packages often, update your dependencies often, and don't ignore the warnings. Actually fix them. Write tests to help you know that your code base is covered and that when you do those dependencies, your code base is still working. All these different things that we look at oftentimes when we think, well, that's just what big companies do because they have lots of developers and they have the time to do that. Well, the reason they do that is because it's necessary to keep your project safe and running and efficient. So you definitely need to plan for that, whether that's your client's work, whether that's your own projects. Get in the habit of writing tests, get in the habit of updating your dependencies, and get in the habit of removing or fixing warnings that are still allowing you to actually build. So go through those things and find those things and fix those things. Don't accept tech debt when you don't need the tech debt. Sometimes tech debt happens because of things that are outside of your control as a developer, but if it's in your control to avoid tech debt, avoid it at all costs, because you're just hurting yourself and somebody else down the road. So either you'll be cursing yourself or somebody else will be cursing you in the future. Ian says, and when you're building an RTOS for a Prius, just ignore the warnings. That's awesome. Yeah, I forget. There was a talk, or a video that I watched of a talk, I think, from years ago, from Uncle Bob. If you don't know who Uncle Bob is, Bob, I think it's Bob Martin, if I remember correctly. It's been around in the development world for years, so feel free to look him up. He's got some good stuff. He's old, older than me, so he's even much more opinionated than I am. But anyway, so one of the things that he was talking about was how eventually, at some point, we as developers are going to be held accountable for the code that we write, because everything is becoming so much more dependent on code and programs and automation and things like that, that when accidents happen, you like think about self-driving cars, right? There's going to be an accident, and who's going to be the one to blame when the problem is in the software? Well, at the end of the day, it's going to be the company, and through the company, the individual who's writing code, right? So that's something that we should think about when we are writing code. Are we writing it responsibly so that we are writing good code that will be able to handle the common issues in those different use cases? Whatever you're writing code for, are you doing it well? And that's not just writing code for a Prius or any other electric vehicle, where you could have this massive accident, in flames and massive loss of life or something like that. It could be as simple as writing software that doesn't have the right security and allow somebody to get in and steal people's information. Like those are not equal, but they are equally bad, right? They're not equal, but they're both bad. They're both things that we as developers need to take into account. And part of that process is updating dependencies, making sure that our code is up to date and works well for years to come as much as possible. So always keep in mind, whatever time you spend building a project, there's going to need to be a bunch of time as well. Maybe not equal to that, but at least significant, a portion of the same amount of time updating and maintaining and enhancing the software that you write. So if you're dealing with clients, that's something that you should help them be aware of. And then, of course, in keeping with last week, we definitely have a meme here. So one does not simply upgrade a JavaScript project. I actually just recently watched the Lord of the Rings trilogy again here in the last couple weeks. So this is poignant for me. All right. Let's see. What's another one here that we want to look at? I thought this was an interesting post here. Let's see. Python frameworks are crazy with dependencies also. Yeah, that's true. I use bot to alert about fixed vulnerabilities in packages. Sometimes it says 89% back compatibility. Yeah, that's the other thing, is working with backwards compatibility as well. That's something you have to keep an eye on. The court docs were from the uncommanded acceleration of the Prius. Yeah, that was not cool. All right, so another one here. This one's a bit of a rant. So let's take a look. As if I never rant, Here we go. Extract all the things. Every Medium article about clean code. Yeah, that's fairly accurate. What tech blogs teach us: abstract for flexibility, layer for maintainability, pattern all the things, future-proof everything. Yeah, I mean that's going to be very, very common. Um, Part of that is because it's easier to teach something when you have that type of setup. It's easier to focus on one specific part of a whole rather than having to explain all the other things that are going on. So if you can, abstraction helps more when you're teaching something, and and so that's why one of the reasons why I think there's so much emphasis on it in something like a Medium article. What production teaches us, no one understands the abstractions. Um, can I just be honest with you? The first time I really worked with a code base that had abstractions, it was the worst thing in the entire world. Just following the rabbit hole of extractions was insane. And when you combine abstractions with poor directory structure and naming conventions, then you end up jumping from one one file to another. This was back before my IDE did the thinking for me on linking. But it was so if you're trying to figure out where code goes and there's multiple files with the same name and most of them are abstract files, like it's really a pain in the rear to try to figure out. The more abstraction you have, the more difficult it is to follow the code, typically. Um, so yeah, every layer hides a bug. Very true, especially when you're looking at your stack, right? When you're looking at your error stack and you just see file after file after file after file, it's hard to know where the issue actually is, and you have to go through and find the bug. It is literally hiding the bug. The more you abstract that, so patterns can become prison cells. They can be, yeah. They can be very helpful as well, but sure. Future proofing killed velocity. Um, I would largely agree with that as well. The more abstract your code becomes, the more you try to make everything future proof, the slower it will be actually building what you're trying to build. Um, I am a fan. I'm a fan of abstracting through necessity. Um, so I will typically build out an application without abstracting as much as I can, and then as I find a need for abstraction, I will add the abstraction. So I don't create abstraction right away. I create abstraction when I find that I have a need for it, mostly within the purpose of not duplicating code. That's the main reason why I abstract things. Um, Another reason why I might would abstract something would be to make it so that I can plug and play future services. Um, However, even with that, I found that the time it takes to abstract that out really often doesn't improve. It doesn't save me time when I do have to switch a service. Um, the concept makes sense, but it isn't always practical. Now, if you're building, especially if you're building a small project, because I'll be honest, most of the projects that I built have been fairly small. But if you're building a large enterprise application, it's worth the time to plan ahead and abstract the things that you need to. I think that's another piece of it too, is a lot of times we just get dropped into a project and you don't really have time to actually sit there and plan out the whole thing from start to finish. And not that you have to do everything from start to finish, but it's really good idea to think through at the beginning of your project what pieces of this project can and should be reusable. And so then you know what parts of the application probably you're going to add some layer of abstraction to. Again, not just abstracting for abstract's sake, but abstracting based on need, based on desired functionality of the code base. So um, if you don't do that, then you're going to spend a lot of time, and all the work that you're doing to protect yourself in the future is going to delay your ability to get a product to market. And quite frankly, especially when it comes to working on client projects, your goal is to get the project to market as soon as possible, not just for them, but for yourself as well. I mean, if future work from that client, they're a good client, then you want to get stuff done and do it well for them. So I would rather create the abstractions as I need them. Yes, or plan ahead and know what they are going to be, but limit them to only the areas where they're absolutely necessary. He goes on to say, the harsh truth is each best practice we follow makes our code base harder to fix. I wouldn't necessarily say that is like a complete generalization is accurate, but it can be. It can be for sure. Just because something is a best practice doesn't mean it's the right thing to do for your specific use case. Especially depending on time. If your client is pushing to get it done, best practices typically are the first thing to go out the window when you need speed. So the real cost, junior devs struggle to contribute. That's extremely true. I mean, if you're working on a very complicated and abstracted code base, a junior dev is going to be there. Junior devs already have a hard enough time understanding non-abstracted code bases because they're dropped into something brand new. They're still in the process of learning even the basis of programming right now. So then to throw them into something that's very difficult to follow and sift through multiple layers, it's going to make it even harder for them to get anything done. Senior devs wrestle to maintain it. Absolutely. Especially if you're bringing new senior devs in who don't know the product from the ground up. They're just jumping into something that's already existing. Features take forever, again, because you're spending a bunch of time following patterns more than you are building something that works. Tech debt compounds daily. I don't know about that one necessarily. I'd have to understand the thinking there. Tech debt to me is more stuff that needs to be fixed or updated. Maybe the idea there is that because everything is abstracted, you're creating your own tech debt for the future. I could maybe get behind that. Remember, your clean architecture is somebody else's legacy nightmare. That is so true. Your clean architecture is somebody else's legacy nightmare. So this is why, I always advocate for just writing code that makes sense. Even if there's duplicate code some places, obviously abstract in those areas when you can, but just write code that makes sense. Don't be so pattern dependent or architecturally dependent that you make something difficult for the next developer, because quite frankly, a lot of times the next developer is you. And when you come back to something you wrote and you don't understand it, that's a problem. So just write code that makes sense. Write variables that make sense, and function names that make sense, and logic that makes sense. And you don't have to have a bunch of comments in your code. Just write good, solid code that makes sense to somebody reading it, and they will appreciate it later on. They might be coming, because here's the deal: somebody later on coming into your code base may have learned a new pattern that some wonderful person has decided we should follow now, and they'll be looking at your old pattern, and it won't make any sense to them, and they'll want to change it to this new pattern. They'll spend a bunch of time probably changing all the controllers and views and all that stuff over to this new pattern, and then 10 years down the road, somebody else is going to come alongside and they're going to say, nobody does that anymore, that's horrible, and they're just rewrite it from scratch anyway. So just write code that makes sense. Don't get so caught up in following specific patterns or abstraction or things like that you end up writing code that you can't maintain or don't want to maintain. Write code that makes sense so that when you have to go update it or adjust it, it's easy to just adjust because you can tell what you need to do where you need to do it. So anyway, he was on a rant and so I got on a rant. So there's that. Best practice: Airbnb is not using Airbnb JS rules. Yep, that's true. Companies always tend to walk away from their best practices at some point. Mel says if people worked in the same project in the same company for more than 2 years, those people would understand the abstractions. I think abstraction was for a time when people stayed for 5 years. That's a really interesting observation, Mel. Um, yeah, I mean, when you are in the same project for years on end, or even even if it's multiple projects within the same company, if you help build it from the ground up, you're obviously going to know it better. So yeah, I mean, abstractions definitely benefit the person. Sorry, abstractions definitely benefit the person who's been there from the beginning and who knows the code base well. Um, Anytime you jump into a brand new code base to you, whether it has a familiar um, framework or not, there's going to be something that isn't the way that you would have done it, and it's going to take some thought and work to understand. And so if we can avoid that, either through using frameworks that are opinionated like Laravel or Nest or things like that, or Next, I mean, things like that, then great. But other than that, just write code that makes sense when you read it. Easiest way to make devs happy. Dimitri, legacy. What idiot did that? I'll redo it. Oh, edge cases. Oh, something else. Result, I'm almost the same. Yep. We spent a lot of time refactoring other people's code just to find out that ours is no better in the end. That definitely happens for sure. All right, let's see. Ooh, excuse me, guys. There's one more. Okay, we'll do this one. This one's more on the job front side of things. All right, from Elizabeth. Ooh, man, dry mouth today. Okay. It says, I don't have time to network right now. I'll do it when I actually need a job. Um, I've been there, to be perfectly honest with you. I did not, it took me a long time to understand the importance of networking. Part of that's because I know you can't tell with me being on camera and everything, but I am somewhat of an introvert. I think I heard a term the other day. It was ambivert. I think that describes probably most people, but definitely describes me. I can be extroverted when I need to be extroverted, but I'm also very happy to just be alone and quiet. So there's that reality. So I spent a lot of time kind of ignoring. I didn't get on LinkedIn for a long time. I didn't understand the point of it. It seemed like a waste of time. It seemed like a bunch of people yammering about pointless things, things that I didn't care about. And so I spent a lot of time early on in my career not networking. I didn't know people. I didn't go to networking events, things like that. Still don't go to networking events because I don't want to. But and I don't really have the time. But in the end, I have found that LinkedIn has been really, really important for my career, and so I try to network with as many people as I can, interact with people on LinkedIn, because you never know in this. Not just in this job market currently, but in this industry, you just never know how long you're actually going to be at a job, and so excuse me, guys. So building a network is really, really important. Um, Not only to help yourself, but also to provide opportunities to help other people as well. So this might be the most expensive sentence in your career. I would agree with that as well. Here's why. Successful people. Here's why successful people are constantly networking, even when they're happy in their roles. The best opportunities don't come from job boards; they come from being in the right place at the right time. 100% totally agree. Even the job that I currently have right now, I got through LinkedIn. I got through networking. So the owner of the company that I work for now, I had followed him at some point, I believe, and maybe even commented on some of his posts. Um, and he actually had reached out to me at one point prior, and I had just started a job, didn't want to try to leave in the middle of that. Um, but he reached out to me via LinkedIn, and asked me if I was interested in applying, and I ended up doing that, and here I am today. So it very much makes an impact, not just from the opportunity to get a job, but even the opportunity to understand what you're worth. When I first got into this, I started as a freelancer working for my brother, um, and he just paid me what I needed to survive, which worked out well for me and worked out well for him because I wasn't that expensive. And and so then I got my first job, and I took a pay cut actually, to get into the world that I wanted to. I was still doing a little bit of work for my brother on the side, so it helped kind of make up the difference that I needed. But the reality is I didn't know what I was worth. I didn't When I took that job, I didn't know what my knowledge and experience was worth in the real world. And I probably honestly should have been making probably double what I made in my first job because I had the knowledge and the skill set to do more than what they were hiring me for. Now, they were hiring for certain positions, so I wouldn't have been able to make that much more. But the point is, I didn't even know what jobs to apply for because I didn't know where my skills ranked among other people. And that's where I think networking can really come in and help you not just open up job opportunities, but give you opportunities to interact with other people and see, where do my skills line up? Where does my knowledge line up? Where do the issues that I'm dealing with and the struggles that I'm having line up with other people in the industry? And where do I rank? What is my worth in this industry? I think networking can really help with that question. And when she says that it's the most expensive sentence in your career, yeah, if you're not networking, you don't know where the opportunities are, and you don't know what you're worth compared to others in the industry. So I fully agree. Um, the key is be in as many right places as possible. This means taking that coffee chat with your old colleagues friend, joining that industry Slack group you've been putting off. Yikes. Actually showing up to that meeting instead of canceling at the last minute. DMing that person whose career path you admire. All right. Yeah, these are all great suggestions. Don't get rid of opportunities. I've had coffee with people that I used to work with, and it's opened up opportunities for side jobs. It's opened up opportunities even to work with them again in other jobs. So you never know what opportunities are going to present themselves through all these different paths, but you gotta be there, to receive the ball. You've got to be in the right place where the quarterback's going to throw it to get it. So definitely agree with this post. But what's the ROI, you might ask? Well, in short, you won't know, and that's the point. But this should give you some confidence. The startup founder who just hired my client, someone they met at a holiday party last year. All right, so somebody just hired someone because they met him at a holiday party and started building a relationship. My old boss came from a blind networking message I sent to a woman I admired. Stop treating networking like a job search task. Start treating it like compound interest for your career. I really like that statement. Again, because we just kind of tend to do these things. So I've got a buddy who doesn't do LinkedIn, despite how many times I've told him that he should. And the reason for it is he feels like his idea of networking is manipulating other people to get something for yourself. And I think that's where this idea of stop trading networking like a job search task. If that's all you're doing with it, then that's really what you're doing. You're just manipulating people to try to get something for yourself. But if you create a habit of interacting with people just to build a network, just to have the connections when you need them down the road, or to have the connections to help other people in the process, like if you have a broader concept of networking, then it is like compound interest for your career. You are going to just have opportunities that show up because of your networking, because your willingness to interact with people. That's why, I get messages all the time on LinkedIn. I try to respond to all of them. Sometimes If it's very clearly like just a quick sales thing, I might just ignore it. But even people who are contacting me and it's very clear that they're trying to tell me something, I still do my best to reject them intentionally. And by that I mean I respond to them and I say, I try to encourage them, but also say, hey, I'm not really interested in this. I try to be personable in those interactions so that they don't just drop off the network. You never know somebody who you've talked to, what opportunities might show up through them. So, yeah, don't treat it like just a job search task. Treat it like a compounding interest for your career. Your network is not a vending machine where you insert coffee chats and get immediate opportunities. That's so true. It's a garden. Plant the seeds now, water them consistently, and watch how they bloom when you least expect it. Again, that least expected part to me is really true. Especially just in this last role. Like I really love working for the company that I work for, and it would not have happened had I not had those interactions on LinkedIn. So, and it was not something I was expecting. So there you go. What's one networking connection that led you to an unexpected opportunity for you? Leave it in the comments. So leave yours in the comments. Let's see. Anybody? Oh, we got some things that I've been ignoring here along the way. Let's check this out. Get rid of that. There we go. Let's see. Man, you guys are just going all over the place. Being extroverted takes a lot of energy, just like learning code. You do it because you know it's worth it in the end. Yep, that's true. Very true, Mel. Introverting and networking is difficult for sure. Yep, get a line of credit before you need a line of credit. The channel, the company's expert says that most jobs are through networking. Yeah. So I actually did a video on this a while back. But companies prefer hiring people through referrals because you can typically trust your employees to want to hire somebody that's going to be beneficial for the company, not just, because their job depends on the company doing well. But referrals are typically the best way to get a job. Companies prefer them. They're typically less expensive to bring somebody on through a referral. So yeah, I mean, having those network connections is just another way of referring to some degree. So networking is definitely the best way to do that. And Ian's practiced at his extroversion. Let's see. You guys are talking to each other. I don't have to read all that stuff out loud. Here's some advice from Ian. Learn to talk to folks about anything. It used to give me a major headache, but as Dale Carnegie says, folks like to talk about themselves. Very true. Learn talking to people about whatever they're interested in may give you something new to be interested in, but it'll definitely make it easier to learn to interact with people that you may not have something easily to connect with. But again, you never know what that person might be able to do for your career in the future. Let's see. Yep, you're always welcome, Mel. All right. Well, I think we'll stop it there, guys. Feel free to hang out in the chat. I think it stays live for a while after the video if you want to keep talking. But I'm gonna get back to work. So thanks for hanging out with us on the last LinkedIn Lunch live stream. Glad to see everybody here. Mel, Dimitri, Ian, anybody else that might have jumped in that I didn't see along the way. Thanks for hanging out with me, sharing your stories. Yep, there's also a Discord, absolutely. And if you're not a member of Discord, jump over to Discord. You can continue the conversation there, or start a new one, or ask for help, or whatever you need over in the Discord channel. Somebody will be there to help you out. whether it's me or somebody else. Again, this will be the last one of the year, so we'll see you all back in 2025. And have a great holidays here between Christmas and New Year's or Hanukkah or whatever else you guys. Nothing if you don't celebrate anything, whatever it is. But have a great holidays. We'll see you guys here in a couple weeks. Back on the 4th, I think, will be our next LinkedIn lunch live stream. If I remember correctly, I'll have to go back and double check that. That might be Saturday. It might be the 7th. I don't know. We'll see. But I'll see you guys then. As always, before you leave, hit the like button. If you're not subscribed, hit the subscribe button, bell icon, all those things so you're notified the next time we go live, which will be 2025. Going live in 25. All right. I better stop now because it's only going to get worse. So have a great day. I'll see you guys later. Thanks for jumping on, and happy holidays.